Imagine someone pressing record on a phone while anger and chaos swirl in the background. Voices raised, accusations exchanged, and a child caught in the crossfire of adult rage. The scene is unsettling, not least because it shows, in stark relief, how a child's world can be upended by aggression, threats, and contempt they do not understand. Children are often described as bearers of innocence, but too often they become witnesses or direct victims of trauma. They hear the words and see the violence, soaking it all in. The child stands with wide eyes and trembling hands, uncertain whether the next few seconds will bring comfort or deeper wounds. There's no dictionary in their mind for emotional damage or psychological abuse. Yet the intangible harm plants seeds that may shape who they become. Children sense more than grown-ups assume. They might not have adult language to articulate sorrow or confusion, but each raised voice or hateful word can embed itself in their core. The adult meltdown on that captured video might end after a few minutes, but the child's recollection could persist for years, coloring everything from self-esteem to relationships. It's not just fleeting fear, it's a formative experience. Whenever childhood is overshadowed by verbal assaults, neglect, or threat, a child's internal narrative about the world warps. They might come to believe that harshness is normal, that affection or safety is conditional, that love is tenuous at best. This is the real tragedy, that a child's developing mind, searching for stability and trust, meets only unpredictability and scorn. These early experiences of harm-term childhood trauma manifest in countless ways. A mother's or father's fury might be the catalyst, or it could stem from physical abuse, sexual violation, bullying, emotional neglect, a chaotic environment riddled with addictions, or some combination thereof. Each type of trauma etches its own pattern of hurt, potentially leading to emotional numbness, outbursts, difficulties in forming healthy attachments, or mental health struggles that carry forward into adolescence and adulthood. For a large number of survivors, the adversity they faced as children reemerges later, couched in different contexts, struggles with self-worth, self-harm, addiction, or a perpetual sense of danger in everyday life. While adult eyes might see a short video clip of people screaming hateful remarks and dismiss it as just a bad argument, a child in that same setting might absorb the event as a sign of personal unworthiness or permanent insecurity. Those who study trauma, from psychologists and psychiatrists to social workers, document how critical the early years are for mental, emotional, and physical development. In these years, the brain is forging neural connections at an incredible pace. Subtle or overt experiences of terror, chronic stress, or a harsh environment can mold the neural architecture, pushing children into a state of hypervigilance or compelling them to detach from emotions for the sake of psychological survival. Indeed, the child might emerge from such experiences with a distorted sense of self. I must be unlovable, or they wouldn't treat me this way. The repeated sting of humiliating words or aggression leaves little room for the genuine curiosity and exploration that define a healthy childhood. The child becomes someone who second-guesses every statement, scanning for potential threats in voices and expressions. Yet childhood trauma is not only about one dramatic or violent event. Sometimes it emerges from a slow-burn environment where a caretaker is consistently cold or neglectful, failing to give empathy or validation. In other cases, the child is forced to witness domestic violence, perhaps not the direct target of abuse but a helpless bystander. This too can be profoundly destabilizing, as the one place they should find sanctuary, the home, becomes a theater of anger and fear. People sometimes overlook the intangible dimensions of trauma. It can rest not just in blows or insults, but in the entire relational climate. When an authority figure, a father, mother, teacher, or older sibling shamas the child for showing vulnerability, the child learns to bury all evidence of vulnerability, turning to secrecy and emotional isolation. That child might grow up physically unscathed but deeply uncertain about how to trust or share themselves with others. Psychology, building on decades of research, explains that these early traumas can freeze the nervous system in states of persistent alert. Think of it like a smoke detector that's forever set on high sensitivity, shrieking at the faintest whiff of smoke. On top of that, the child's body can store the stress responses, leading to psychosomatic ailments or a predisposition to health issues. Because these associations and triggers are encoded in their earliest sense of reality, unraveling them in adulthood is no trivial task. People might spend years in therapy confronting limiting beliefs or panic responses that trace back to events they can barely recollect. Another cruel irony: these transformations in the psyche and body often come with guilt or shame, as though the child turned adult is somehow to blame for being damaged. Meanwhile, the abusers might live without recognizing or atoning for the devastation they caused. At times, reading about or witnessing stories of children who overcame horrifying childhoods can provide hope. Some become activists or artists who channel their pain into empathy and creation. The concept of post-traumatic growth illuminates the possibility that adversity, once processed, can lead to resilience, deeper capacity for compassion, or an intense moral drive to protect others. But these are not guaranteed outcomes. Without interventions, be it therapy, a supportive community, or personal resilience strategies, many survivors remain stuck, forever playing out the painful legacy they never asked for. The child in that recorded outburst might grow up frightened to express needs or to trust. Or, in a darker script, they may replicate learned patterns, reenacting aggression in their own relationships. The cycle can perpetuate unless broken by awareness and healing. Understanding childhood trauma, therefore, demands a holistic approach. The mental health realm offers definitions, diagnoses, and a range of therapies from cognitive behavioral therapy to eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Seminal books like The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk or Trauma and Recovery by Judith Herman map out how complex these wounds can be and the steps needed to heal them. But no single text or method is a panacea. Some find that talk therapy helps them process memories and reframe their self-image, while others need somatic methods that target stored tension and adrenaline. For certain individuals, working with a trauma-informed yoga practice or a specialized mindfulness approach helps them re-inhabit their bodies safely. Crucially, the presence of a supportive environment can be as healing as the best therapy. Humans are social beings, and while some forms of emotional injury arise in relationships, the antidote often comes through nurturing and stable relationships. A kind teacher, a caring friend, or a wise counselor can tip the balance, showing that trust can exist. Child protective interventions can be critical when harmful home dynamics persist. Where therapy or official steps are inaccessible, a neighbor or extended family member might serve as a lifeline, offering the child small but meaningful examples of reliability. In the vacuum of consistent adult support, the child can become resigned to suffering or interpret the abuse as normal, and never even realize they're living in trauma until something breaks open much later in life. Even as an adult, healing from childhood trauma can create enormous relief but also confusion. Some survivors experience a wave of sadness for the childhood innocence they lost, or a simmering anger at a world that failed to protect them. In the process, they might question their identity or the attachments they formed. They might wonder if every choice they made was influenced by the fear or distrust seeded early on. This soul-searching is tough, often requiring the adult to grieve the child who wasn't adequately sheltered, to integrate parts of themselves that were exiled in the name of survival. Step by step, new patterns can replace the old ones. Instead of responding to perceived rejection with numbness or rage, they can learn to slow down, breathe, and remind themselves they are not powerless anymore. They can attempt meaningful relationships with less fear that closeness leads to harm. Beyond personal healing, addressing childhood trauma also has a societal dimension. If large numbers of children face abuse or neglect, the repercussions echo through entire communities for generations. People with unhealed trauma may be more prone to substance abuse, depression, difficulties in stable employment, and compromised physical health. It's no exaggeration to say that cyclical patterns of violence or dysfunction can hamper social development on a grand scale. On the other hand, effective interventions like educating parents, ensuring mental health resources in schools, or training professionals in trauma sensitivity can mitigate future harm and even reduce crime, improve educational outcomes, and cultivate more empathetic adult populations. Media and cultural narratives also matter. Sometimes, certain behaviors are normalized: the ranting father, the belittling adult, the humiliating caretaker, as though they are just strict discipline or comedic hyperbole. Child audiences may interpret these images as affirmations that their own harsh experiences are normal or deserved. Conversely, showing more constructive conflict resolution, more tender forms of correction, or more robust dialogue about mental health can shift collective norms. Already, movements like #MeToo or increased discussion of domestic violence have shed light on once taboo topics, letting survivors see they're not alone. The existential component cannot be overlooked. The child who's consistently belittled might grow up with a sense that life is cruel or meaningless, or that the cosmic design singled them out for pain. They might ask, "Why me? Why was I chosen for this suffering?" Philosophical traditions, from Stoicism to Buddhism, grapple with how humans should respond to suffering that's neither earned nor reasoned. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning resonates with many trauma survivors, as it insists that one can shape an internal sense of purpose even amid brutal external circumstances. This doesn't romanticize suffering but offers a beam of possibility, that adversity could become a forge for character and empathy. All of this is to say that the child in the earlier snippet, verbally abused by an adult figure, is no small matter. It's a window into how children can experience and internalize violence or humiliation. The adult in question might dismiss it as a fleeting outburst or blame the child as annoying, but from the child's vantage, it's a blow to identity. Observers or bystanders might be moved to reflect on their own experiences of being in that child's position, or might vow not to replicate that dynamic with their own kids. The resonance is widespread because nearly everyone, at some juncture, has felt powerless under the weight of someone else's cruelty. For those reading or hearing stories of childhood trauma and seeing echoes of their own lives, it's vital to emphasize that healing is genuinely possible, though not always quick or simple. The mind's capacity to reorganize and recover from adversity is documented in psychological and medical research. Therapies exist that can help rewire triggered stress responses. Relational patterns can be unlearned, and supportive communities can step in where families failed. Self-discovery, sometimes with the help of reference books, personal writing, or group discussions, can build fresh narratives of resilience. The trauma never fully disappears, but one can integrate it, rendering it a chapter in life rather than the entire story. If we come back to the child being yelled at, threatened with allegations about their parent going to jail, or labeled as worthless or unlovable, we see the seeds of potential heartbreak. But heartbreak is not destiny. If that child encounters a teacher who gently acknowledges their pain, or a neighbor who steps forward with a listening ear, or a mental health professional who invests in their well-being, the outcome can be drastically reshaped. And if they happen upon a supportive peer group or a space where their inherent worth is recognized, they might eventually realize that the hateful words do not define them. They can develop a sense of self that stands independent of the adult meltdown that marred their early years. Yet illusions persist about trauma. illusions that it's purely personal or that time alone heals everything. Time might dull the edges, but it seldom addresses the underlying patterns or beliefs. Confronting childhood trauma typically entails actively engaging with one's past through therapy, creative expression, or spiritual reflection, and forging strategies for living differently in the present. In essence, it becomes a journey of self-exploration and acceptance, where the once silenced child can be allowed to speak or cry or laugh without fear of shame. It is neither easy nor guaranteed, but each step along that path helps reclaim a slice of childhood that adversity once threatened to steal away. No matter how twisted the adult words or how vile the threats, the child in the video snippet and countless children like them deserve empathy, solace, and reassurance that they matter. Those children also deserve a chance to live free from the permanent chill of fear. For many, it will be up to the adult versions of themselves to eventually create that sense of safety, aided by the compassion of others. The memory of hateful words might never vanish entirely, but the significance of them can fade, overshadowed by new experiences of kindness, self-worth, and unconditional belonging.